Everything changed in a matter of seconds. Seriously, just take a step back and imagine this. Imagine holding the entire, crushing weight of an NFL franchise squarely on your shoulders. You were the one tasked with managing a massive, complex $255.4 million salary cap limit. You're coordinating a sprawling national scouting department, navigating the absolute chaos of free agency, and trying to salvage a make-or-break draft. You do it. You literally build a roster designed to dominate the league, only to realize that your ultimate reward is one of the most stunning twists of fate in modern football history. Welcome to NFL Nexus. I am your host, and before we completely unravel this incredible front office standoff, please make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this explainer, and comment your thoughts down below. Oh, and if you want to really support our deep dives, hit that join button to become a channel member. Okay, let's get into this. Right now, ticking clock tension is completely suffocating the Minnesota Vikings front office. It is a gripping story of power, of rapidly shifting NFL hierarchies, and of a brilliant architect who might just have to watch someone else live in the very mansion he just built.
I want you to listen very closely to these words. We'll sit down with Rob, as we will with other candidates. Read that again. Let that sink in. This is a direct quote from Vikings owner Mark Wilf. This single sentence highlights the stark, honestly almost surreal contrast currently unfolding in Minnesota. This is not ownership coming out and saying, hey, Rob has earned the job. This isn't them saying, Rob stepped up and proved himself in our darkest hour. No way. This is ownership promising to sit down with Rob Brzezinski, a man who has spent more than 2 decades grinding inside the Vikings organization, their executive vice president of football operations, the literal guy who just flawlessly directed every major personnel transaction for 3 months, and treating him like he's just some random stranger who submitted a resume on LinkedIn. It's wild. It is an unprecedented business decision, and it has absolutely sent shockwaves through the entire National Football League.
To really understand the pure gravity of this situation, we have to look at the timeline, because the pace of this is just frantic. Let's trace how fast this house of cards collapsed and how quickly it was rebuilt. Back in 2025, the Wilfs family handed general manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah a multi-year extension. At the time, it was this huge public vote of confidence, but man, did that extension age terribly. Adofo-Mensah's tenure became completely plagued by roster shortcomings. We're talking highly criticized early-round draft picks, like the Lewis Cine situation, and massive crippling dead cap hits resulting from aggressively restructuring contracts with void years. It was a mess. So on January 30th, 2026, after 4 seasons of compounding errors, Adofo-Mensah was abruptly fired. The wreckage left behind was immense. Ownership was staring down an incredibly tight salary cap threshold with roughly 40 days until free agency opened. 40 days. Enter Rob Brzezinski. Handed the keys as interim GM, he didn't just stabilize the ship, he put a rocket engine on it. By March, he orchestrated the stunning signing of star quarterback Kyler Murray and brought in Carson Wentz for critical depth. By April 25th, he somehow navigated that razor-thin cap to secure a massive 9-player draft class headlined by first-round defensive lineman Caleb Banks. And then, after doing all of that, in May, ownership immediately began announcing external GM interviews.
Section 1. The War Room Masterpiece. Completing the offensive puzzle.
Before we even get to the external candidates who are circling this opening like sharks, we absolutely need to examine what happened inside the building. The draft board was completely cleared. The last pick was submitted, and Rob Brzezinski is sitting in the Vikings war room having just engineered an absolute roster masterpiece. He completed an offensive puzzle that completely transformed Minnesota's outlook for 2026. The crown jewel of this offseason maneuvering came right before training camp. Brzezinski targeted and secured former San Francisco 49ers standout Jauan Jennings. Now look at the precise financial masterstroke at play here. It's a 1-year deal with a base of $8 million, maxing out at $13 million through incentives. And those incentives are incredibly smart. They are reportedly tied to very specific production milestones, like hitting 50 catches, crossing 700 receiving yards, and actually advancing in the playoffs. Now, $8 million might sound a little steep for a wide receiver 3, but you have to look at the larger cap percentage. With young star Jordan Addison still on the final year of his highly affordable rookie deal, this Jennings contract fits perfectly into the ledger. It is a calculated, low-risk, incredibly high-reward investment that patches the single most glaring post-draft hole on this entire roster. So what exactly did that $8 million buy the Minnesota Vikings? Well, it bought them the Jauan Jennings effect. The Vikings already had route-running savants, we know that, but they were desperately missing an enforcer. Jennings stands 6'3", 212 pounds of pure, unfiltered physicality. Just look at the track record. In 2024, he caught 77 passes for 975 yards. Last season, he racked up 643 yards and a career-high 9 touchdowns. This guy isn't just replacing Jalen Nailor. He is bringing a brutal physical edge at the route stem that actually forces separation, especially when the field shrinks in the red zone. But here is the kicker, perhaps the most important part. He is a punishing, versatile run blocker. Why does that matter? Because new offensive coordinator Frank Smith's scheme relies on it. Smith heavily utilizes wide zone blocking concepts that require the wide receivers to get their hands dirty. They have to dig out safeties and linebackers to create those explosive cutback lanes for the running backs. With his size and his absolute tenacity for blocking, Jennings can be utilized in line, in the slot, or at H-back in condensed sets. He makes the running game exponentially more dangerous. He's exactly, down to the final detail, what this offense lacked. And if you want to know how terrifying this is for opposing defenses, just look at the raw data. This proves undeniably that Minnesota now boasts the absolute premier receiver room in the entire NFL. Over the last 2 seasons, only 23 wide receivers in the entire league have compiled at least 1,400 yards and 12 touchdown catches. Just 23. Look at the top of the list. The Minnesota Vikings now have 3 of them: Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and Juwan Jennings. Think about that. The Bengals, the Eagles, the Lions, the Chargers, they only have 2. Other elite offenses are out there relying on unproven third options. You've got guys like Isaac Tisslaw in Detroit or Andre Iosivas in Cincinnati. But the Vikings, they literally have a legitimate number 2 receiver happily destroying defenses as their number 3. In modern football, teams operate heavily out of 11 personnel. That's 1 running back, 1 tight end, and 3 wide receivers on the field at the same time. So imagine you're a defensive coordinator. If you play light coverage to try and stop Jefferson and Addison, Jennings is just going to feast on your smaller defensive backs. If you play base defense and put bigger guys on the field, Jennings outmuscles your linebackers anyway. It is an unanswerable riddle.
But of course, nothing in the NFL is free. Getting Jennings required a brutal, highly calculating sacrifice. To clear the cap space required for this move, Brzezinski traded Pro Bowl pass rusher Jonathan Greenard to the Eagles. Now, on the surface, losing a premier edge rusher sounds crazy, right? It hurts, but you have to look at the underlying logic. In 2025, the Vikings were 3rd in the NFL in defensive expected points added per play. Expected points added, or EPA, essentially measures how much a single play improves a team's statistical chances of scoring on that specific drive. So their defense was elite at limiting opponent EPA, but their offense? It was a dismal 28th. Something had to give. Brzezinski effectively swapped Greenard and a 7th-round pick for Jennings and 2 third-round picks. By moving Greenard out, he didn't just get draft capital. He cleared nearly $19 million off the books. And crucially, this cleared a path and freed up a full-time role for rising star Dallas Turner to take over all the primary edge rushing snaps. It was a brilliant, cold-blooded maneuver to perfectly balance a lopsided roster. Section 2. The Interim General Manager Trap. Competence as a liability.
This brings us to the really chilling reality of the interim GM position. Have you ever wondered what actually happens when an interim manager does their job perfectly? What happens when they execute so flawlessly that they completely eliminate the very crisis they were hired to fix? Well, in the brutal, hyper-competitive corporate ecosystem of the NFL, that competence actually becomes a profound liability. Notice the perverse paradox playing out here. On one hand, we see Brzezinski's undeniable triumphs. He solved the most important position in sports by securing Kyler Murray. He fortified the defensive line by drafting Caleb Banks in the first round. He completed the ultimate receiver trio with Juwan Jennings. But then, look at the grim consequence. By building this pristine, competitive roster, Brzezinski inadvertently transformed the Vikings GM job into the most attractive, turnkey vacancy in the entire league. He cleaned the house, he set the table, he cooked a 5-star meal, and now every single hungry executive in the league is knocking on the door, wanting to sit at the head of the table. Now, the Wilfs promised a respectful search. They utilized the third-party search firm Turnkey ZRG to keep things professional. But let's be real. Promising secrecy in an incestuous league of 32 teams is literally like whispering in a crowded stadium. The leaks started instantly. And just look at the sheer caliber of external candidates drawn to this opening. You've got Dave Ziegler in Tennessee, Terrence Gray in Buffalo, Ed Dodds from the Colts, Ray Agnew from the Lions. And take a name like Andy Weidel in Pittsburgh. This is a man who helped build the absolute juggernaut offensive and defensive trenches for the Philadelphia Eagles before bringing his talents to the Steelers. He brings a massive, undeniable pedigree. Other names like Alec Hallaby in Philadelphia and John McKay of the Rams have also been floated out there. These are heavy hitters. These are the outside forces actively stepping in to potentially claim an empire they had absolutely no hand in building, which is creating a profound, thick sense of tension inside the walls of US Bank Stadium. Let's actually isolate just one of these candidates to highlight the stark, factual contrast of this executive search: Dave Ziegler. Ziegler was the general manager of the Las Vegas Raiders until he was fired midway through the 2023 season. Yes, he has absolutely worked to rebuild his reputation since then, but consider the business dynamics at play right now. The Vikings ownership is actively interviewing a man whose previous tenure ended in a mid-season dismissal, and they are essentially offering him a chance to take over a flawless 2026 offseason masterminded by their own internal executive. Hiring an outsider like Ziegler means ownership is betting on a candidate who is aiming for personal redemption, rather than simply rewarding the man in their own building who just executed the most difficult, high-pressure turnaround imaginable. It is wild to think about.
Section 3. The head coach power play. Picking the boss.
If we zoom out for a second, we realize that this situation isn't just some localized Minnesota drama. It is actually a symptom of a massive league-wide power struggle that is actively reshaping NFL history as we speak. The traditional hierarchy of the sport is being torn down, and right in the center of the demolition is head coach Kevin O'Connell. Read this report from ESPN very carefully. Kevin O'Connell will have significant input in the GM selection. Just let that mind-bending reality hang in the air for a second. The head coach is actively helping to pick his own boss. He is literally sitting at the table, evaluating the executives who will, theoretically, hold the absolute power to fire him someday. How does that happen? O'Connell gained this massive leverage through his sheer offensive prowess and his uncanny ability to navigate turbulent quarterback transitions, specifically moving from the Kirk Cousins era over to Kyler Murray. Modern NFL owners heavily favor offensive-minded head coaches right now. They view them as the true, irreplaceable engine of a franchise, and that shifts the balance of power dramatically.
This isn't an accident. This isn't a fluke. This is the new blueprint for NFL supremacy. Look at the clear steps of this modern power structure. First, the coach arrives and establishes a beloved locker room culture. The players buy in. Second, when the team inevitably hits a rough patch and stumbles, the blame doesn't fall on the beloved coach. It falls on the front office, and the GM is purged. Third, the surviving head coach demands a seat at the table to chew the replacement, leveraging his value to the owners. And fourth, the coach functionally seizes total control of the franchise. Kevin O'Connell is following the exact path carved out by other power players in the league. Think about Sean McVay arriving in Los Angeles, eventually forming a complete synergy with Les Snead. Or Sean Payton taking total control in Denver and shaping the front office to his absolute will. Make no mistake, whoever steps into the GM role in Minnesota will know, from day one, that the man wearing the headset on Sundays is the one who allowed them to be hired. It reshapes every single dynamic in the building.
Section 4. An uncertain future. The ticking clock. Time is rapidly running out. This is the Vikings' second massive front office reset in just 4 years, and the consequences of dragging this search out are profound. The regular season is approaching incredibly fast, and the organization is just frozen in limbo. 12. That is the exact number of weeks between the start of this executive search and the beginning of training camp. 12 weeks. In the NFL calendar, that is a horrifyingly compressed timeline. A general manager's job in June and July is incredibly dense. We aren't just talking about watching film. They have to finalize complex rookie wage pool distributions, officially sign the entire draft class, manage tricky June 1st salary cap casualties, evaluate hundreds of undrafted free agents, and organize massive multi-million-dollar training camp logistics. If this search drags into late June, the incoming GM will have absolutely zero ramp-up time to prepare for the season. Every single day that passes is a day of structural instability for a team that should be gearing up for a Super Bowl run. So, you have to ask yourself, why is ownership casting such a wide net instead of just locking in their interim guy and getting to work? It's because they are terrified of history repeating itself. The ghost of Sam Darnold and the fallout of 2025's massive mistakes still heavily haunt US Bank Stadium. Remember, Darnold left in free agency, landing a hefty 2-year, $50 million deal with the Seattle Seahawks. That deal serves as a glaring, painful reminder of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's catastrophic quarterback evaluations and just how volatile the quarterback market truly is. Ownership extended Kwesi, right? And 12 months later, they had to fire him and eat the massive financial consequences. That failure bred extreme, totally understandable paranoia in the Wilf family. They want to pressure test every single assumption, cross every T, dot every I, even if it means leaving the very man who actually fixed their roster completely dangling in a state of professional limbo. Which leads us to the ultimate dramatic twist in this whole saga. Rob Brzezinski is not powerless in this situation. He actually has one final, devastating card left to play. He could utilize his ultimate leverage and simply resign before they ever have the chance to reject him. Think about that. He could end a decades-long tenure on his own terms, choosing to walk away from his masterpiece rather than waiting around for a phone call to tell him he's been passed over for an outsider. He proved he could navigate the hardest 3 months in franchise history. He built the roster, he fixed the cap, he drafted the stars. And yet, it still might not be enough to secure the title he has worked his entire life for.
So, I leave you with this final, unresolved question. When the stadium lights finally go on for Week 1, who will actually be leading the roster that Rob Brzezinski built? Will the Wilfs wake up, realize what they have right in front of them, and hand him the keys? Or will an outsider step in to inherit the ultimate turnkey empire? Let me know exactly who you would hire in the comments below. I read all of them. Do not forget to subscribe to NFL Nexus, smash that like button, and please become a channel member for more deep dives into the fascinating, cutthroat world of the NFL. I'll see you next time on The Explainer.